Well, I'd like to get into that as well. Back to the military-industrial complex companies, Raytheon, Lockheed Martin, Skunk Works, all these. How many people do you estimate are on these programs within these different companies?
Well, there are thousands. There has
thousands at each company?
Not at each company. Well, in the bigger ones, very likely. Now, remember, you can have, because of top secret special compartmented information protocols, you can have a guy at this desk in a cubicle working on something. He'll have no idea what this one's working on.
So you have basically an enterprise of people that are all working on one project, not realizing what that project is.
Correct.
Okay.
They wouldn't know. Now, at the more senior management and coordination, they would, obviously. But let's call them the pieces out there. They would have one piece of it. But those can be very valuable sources of intelligence that I've been meeting with for decades, because they may know just one area. They may have this one sliver of information. I feel like my job has been to do the whole comprehensive intelligence assessment from thousands of pieces from credible people inside these corporations and in government programs, and put them together into, it's like a scattered puzzle with 1,000 pieces. So you got to eventually put it together into the picture. And so sort of one of my tasks is to make that picture come together based on specific evidence, whistleblower testimony, documents, everything, which has really been my whole project. I mean, since 92, 93, when I briefed the CIA director in 93, we had a comprehensive assessment of the situation. And that's evolved in 30 years, obviously, because we keep getting more granular detail and specific intelligence. And this is what we've been handing over to the U.S. government since they passed the law a couple years ago, ordering the Director of National Intelligence and the Pentagon to report on this. Now, the problem is the people who were put in charge of that, to be quite blunt, couldn't find their ass in a well-lighted room with both hands. And sorry, it's my old Southern expression, but they absolutely had no idea, about the issue. And you saw last spring, there was a couple of those guys, Dr. Shawn Kirkpatrick and an ONI guy, and they were before Congress, members of Congress who'd looked at our disclosure project content prior, about the Maelstrom Air Force Base, Minot, North Dakota case where there was a intercontinental ballistic missiles taken offline. I think it was 18 of them, something like that. And they asked Dr. Kirkpatrick and the other gentleman from Naval Intelligence, and they go, well, we've never heard of that. Well, anyone who would have read the disclosure book that came out in 2001, we have the documents, we have the government official documents, we have the NORAD documents, we have the two witnesses, one who was in NORAD and one who was in the silo, all on the record, right?
Wow.
Firsthand. So now we have 100 of those that we've already brought out. Go to my YouTube channel. You'll see 70 of them up there, or 80. The problem is that when you're first trying to find out about this, the amount of information, like we're sitting on 8, 9, 10 terabytes of data in my archive that we're trying to organize. We call it the Disclosure Project Intelligence Archive, the DPIA. And that's what we're putting and organizing and handing off. As soon as we get it to any state and new information, I hand off another hard drive to these top secret guys who are trying to find out. But we need to pick up the pace, obviously, because there's a clock. We'll talk about this. There's a clock now been set on this.
Well, we will get into all that. When you're talking about these disinformation agents, these NOCs, I have somebody that comes to mind, and we were talking about him at lunch. Lou Elizondo. Is he one of them?
No, of course. I mean, as soon as he emerged on the stage, I had a very senior guy at CIA who's worked this issue since 1979 contact me about that problem. But remember, the only way that you can control at this point all this coming out, because of what we have and what we're pushing forward through media, is to control the narrative, the spin. So the people coming forward who get an all-access pass on to, say, 60 Minutes or something like that, or people cleared by this same illegal, corrupt organization because they'll tell the public, yes, the UAPs are real, but we don't know what they are. Well, this is an absolute lie. We absolutely know what they are. Some of them are ours, man-made, and are confused quite frequently with the others, which are of extraterrestrial origin, or ETVs, extraterrestrial vehicles. And those operatives are taught very well to take an issue, grab it, capture it, and then spin it in the direction that they want. Now, the direction they want is endless ambiguity. Gee, we don't know what they are. We don't know what they are. It's nonsense. We've proven what they are. Well, I have 755 whistleblowers.
You have 755 whistleblowers?
Yeah. I mean, this archive is unbelievable.
You had mentioned that you would want to debate Lou Elizondo.
Oh, I'd be happy to. I mean, someone brought that up a couple years ago. I don't have any animus towards him personally. I just know what his role and function is because I was given a heads up on it as soon as he emerged out of the Pentagon and stood up his operation with this young guy I used to hang with, Tom DeLonge of Blink-182. He'd stay at my house in Virginia. But what you expect counterintelligence and disinformation agents to do is to do exactly that. Now, remember, all that happened when our documentary Unacknowledged, which you can still see on Amazon Prime and everywhere, reached about 750 million viewers. At that point, they said, we need to take this narrative, acknowledge that these are real, but then change the narrative from the truth, which is what we're putting out, to sort of a fantasy or sort of a diversion. And then those folks like Chris Mellon and Nick Pope and Elizondo would go up on Capitol Hill, whisper into the ears of folks like Senator Rubio of the Intelligence Committee and others, basically telling them false information. But the false information works when you can put it around something real. Now, what was the real thing? The tic-tac, the F-18 Hornets chasing off the coast of California, those events that happened, that the footage was leaked, it was a vehicle for them to attach that false narrative to it. Okay. So you have to understand how counterintelligence and psychological warfare operations are designed. It's very effective. I mean, it is very effective. I would say 90% of people who study UFOs got gaslit. Certainly the U.S. Congress and the media did. So they're very good at doing it. It doesn't mean that it's right, but I'd be very happy to go tete-a-tete on that with anybody.
Let's talk about, I would love to host that, by the way.
Great,
so
do it.
Yeah, maybe we can get something going.
Although I have to tell you, he's called me a terrorist, which I find rather funny.
Oh, boy. Here we go.
Here we go. Hey, I've had 30 years of defamation of my character, so I'm sort of bulletproof from it.
Yeah. The Stargate program. Mm-hmm. During your last interview, I saw a lot of comment. There's two programs that I would like you to explain before we dive into the nuts and bolts of what we're going to. A lot of questions about the Stargate program. Can you enlighten us?
Well, you'd have to describe it. That name is not a code word that I've been introduced to from a reliable inside source person who knows.
Okay.
So here's just to give you an idea of my discipline.
Well, I appreciate the honesty. Thank you.
So if somebody has told me about an operation, whether it's a code word, code numbered, or just a general project that I know has the credentials and we know he was involved directly, firsthand, not second, third, fourth-hand gossip over the internet, then I will speak to that. But now, if you describe to me what people think Stargate is, I can comment on whether it's got any legitimacy.
Well, from what I've read, people are saying that the Stargate program is doing some kind of experimentation with kids.
Mm-hmm. Oh, well. I mean, it has a different name, but absolutely that's true. And as you know, Mr. Herrera, the Marine who was at our conference, who I think you'll be speaking with soon, he came across such an operation. He initially thought they were transporting in this man-made UFO drugs. They certainly had weapons, illegal weapons that they were distributing. But those crates that our forensic aerospace artist drew, or we had a knock who was there, who had been involved in an operation after that. And those were transporting children and women and certain men who had certain capabilities that would be used in experimental projects here and in other countries. It's a monstrous program. There's a man who lives right near here who was a CIA operative and was very young, was one of these victims of this. And he wants to come forward, but he's quite frightened. He's already signed affidavits about it. But there's a CIA black site 160, not far from Nashville, that was involved in some of these operations, mostly drugs and drug running, but also trafficking.
So it's a human trafficking operation. It's part of Stargate.
Yeah, but you have to understand what it's for. It's not for, shits and giggles, excuse me. It's rather, I have to say, some of these projects, they're very disturbing. And I don't know how much people want to hear this, but
they want to hear
it will keep you awake at night. If you have children like I do. But they're used in very specific operations, and they're selected for certain capabilities, particularly psi capabilities. Okay. And those are used in projects that these illegal projects are running for the purpose of communication.
So what's coming to my mind right now is remote viewing.
Yes.
Is that involved in this?
But in a very high-tech way, technologically. Most of the subjects die as a consequence of what they're made to do. But they have certain aptitudes and abilities for which they are screened, and then they are abducted and taken. Now, keep in mind, this is also, there are a lot of operations that are related to this. Recently there was a whistleblower came out talking about the aliens murdering humans, and he was referring to a case that I know for a fact were our operations, these illegal secret government operations that were down in South America, and they've done it in Africa also, where they have killed innocent people in villages to make it look like an alien attack. Now, that information is being now provided to Congressman Tim Burchett and the Senate Intelligence Committee as if those were extraterrestrial events. They have no idea. It's our guys doing it.
I'm trying to get Tim on the show.
No, he's great. I've met with him. He's in this heart and soul. Here's the risk, though, and if anyone in Congress is watching, I want to word this very carefully. A little knowledge is an extremely dangerous thing here, because this is a hall of smoke and mirrors and deception, and you have to then wind this back. What would a clandestine operation have if unsupervised since the late 1950s, where they've had some of the most brilliant scientific minds I've ever met working these projects? They've had almost an infinite amount of money, trillions of dollars that have gone into the R&D, studying both human breakthroughs and also extraterrestrial vehicles, propulsion systems, communication systems, material science, what things are made of, how they're made. Well, you figure after 80 years of that and trillions of dollars, you're going to have some payoffs. And these payoffs are in the form of advanced advanced technologies, and ARVs, alien reproduction vehicles that are the man-made ones, but also this whole area of nanobiotechnology, consciousness and mind interface technologies, all manner of weapon systems that are what are called scalar or longitudinal, go faster than the speed of light. It's like an EMP, but on steroids. It has, instead of a wave like this for electromagnetic, it's a straight line that goes out longitudinally called scalar. And those are faster than the speed of light. They can be used for interstellar communications, but they can also be weaponized. They've been weaponized. So there are all manner, there's a whole constellation again of sciences and technologies, and the CIA science and technology guys, I've met with some of them, that are so far beyond what let's call it the white world, the legal government, including Lockheed, Northrop Grumman. My uncle never worked on this stuff. He worked on the lunar module, landed on the moon the first time. That was my mom's oldest brother. And his whole career was with Northrop Grumman. He was never read into this other end of it. Mm-hmm. So one of the things people have to keep in mind, most of the people in the military, CIA, special operations, corporate, what have you, who work in that world are not part of some vast conspiracy. It's incredibly tightly held. But that's in my view, that's their Achilles heel. By definition, it has to be kept pretty small, pretty tight, which makes them vulnerable if, we'll get to this later, if the U.S. government actually has the will to go the distance to get this under control. And they need to get it under control fairly quickly because it's getting out of hand.
Let's talk about Project Bluebeam. Mm-hmm. Can you describe what that is?
Well, that's another subculture term that's been attached to a series of projects that involve what the Pentagon, what they call a deceptive indication and warning, or a false INW, which is a false flag. And it's the ability to stage, through very advanced technologies, an alien attack or an alien event. And it's a whole series of them. Now, what most people don't know about, since late 50s, early 60s, like the Barney Hill case and all that, those were all human assets abducting innocent people made to look alien. And so that psychological warfare was authorized in 1953, 54. 1954, we mastered gravity control. So we started deploying these assets to begin to condition the public that there's a scary threat from outer space. Mm-hmm. I mean, look at Hollywood, Alien, Ridley Scott's the movies. If you want to see a script for what's coming fairly soon, look at the movie Independence Day. Okay. It's right out of central casting for this covert group. So what their whole purpose is to create sort of a global militarized totalitarian superstate of the world fighting another world. It's like War of the Worlds. Okay. And that's been a 70-year defense plan. And I know people who've seen that plan. Carol Rosin saw the plan, who is Werner von Braun's spokesperson, who's on our team. And she's almost 80 now, but brilliant mind. And, when she realized in the 70s that this was what was afoot, her whole life was devoted to trying to get some of these projects under control. But we're little David's up against an enormous Goliath. And nevertheless, the truth, if people want the truth, Gloria Steinem said, the truth will set you free, but first it'll piss you off. But it's time for people to, actually realize that this is something they have to take seriously. So now, if you add those capabilities to holographic capability, scalar weapon capability, space-time systems where you can alter the flow of space-time in an area, which gets into some really, at the CIA, they call this WSFM, weird science and frickin' magic. At my uncle's company, I met an engineer that dealt with this stuff a couple years ago, and he said, we just call it PFM, pure fucking magic, excuse my language. But he says, literally, that's what we call it. So you're dealing with technologies that are, and this is the problem, I call it the big technology gap between what conventional Pentagon, special forces, joint staff, Senate Intel, Armed Services, House Intel, the President, national security people, what they know and what this group has. So what they know, it's like this is, just to make this real for people. When I was briefing years ago, the admiral in charge of J2, Joint Intelligence for Joint Chiefs of Staff, Admiral Wilson, and that memo leaked out where he was debriefed by Dr. Davis, and everyone went, oh, my God. And it states, I was there for a stand-up briefing, and what they don't know is that at the end of it, I asked the Admiral to help us get to, and this is 97, this is 26 years ago. And he said, well, I don't know how I'm going to help with something when the best technology we can deploy, is a B-2 stealth. And this other group have objects that can do circles around the B-2s. And he acknowledged that to me. I said, well, that doesn't mean you can't. He says, well, I can't unless it's authorized. I said, well, where do you need the authorization? Well, he felt he needed authorization from the SecDef, who had already been waived off, and the president, which was Clinton at the time, who had also, I have a very interesting story since I saw you, but we knew that Clinton had been approached by George H.W. Bush and told, butt out, this is none of your business, dealing with the UFO issue. Because this was one of the very first things Clinton wanted to know about, because I knew people who lived at the White House with him. He was very keen on getting to the bottom of it, but the efforts he launched were torpedoed, and he eventually backed off of it. But,
Interesting.
Yeah, I know that whole story. It's an ugly story of corruption and power being abused. But he did initially want to really find out what was going on, and it was a sincere effort. And there was an entire special operation stood up around getting that. But I have a very famous Hollywood agent and a superstar who was in a limo with, they don't want me to use their names, with Clinton after he left office. And they asked about the UFO issue, and the president said, oh, yes. He says, but I was told by George H.W. Bush that this was none of my business and butt out. And it was made very clear. You're just you're only the president. You get the drift. So, now, obviously, if we're going to have a constitution, the rule of law, and a democratic republic, that kind of thing cannot stand. But because of the power and the money behind this group, it has stood. And, years ago in 93, I was at the Wrigley Mansion, and I'll tell you, Shawn, it was a very interesting meeting. It was like late at night, 10, 11 o'clock at night, and there was a conference room full of suits. And they approached me, and this is the fall of 93, just before I briefed CIA Director Woolsey. And they said, look, you don't need to be talking. They knew all about this meeting that was going to happen. And you don't need to be talking to the president and the CIA Director about this. They don't know anything, and they're not going to know anything. If you want to know, you talk to us. We're the WFO. We're the work for other contractors. We're the people who are working on these technologies and doing the technology transfer. And then they were trying to convince me to side with what they were doing. And I said, no. I said, this is a corrupt enterprise. And then he offered that, he says, you're a doctor. You can take out as many credit cards as you want. We'll zero them out each month because we run the supercomputers that back up the entire banking system. And we can get an infinite amount of money through certain techniques. And so we'll just zero them out. I said, then you're going to own me, aren't you? Because isn't that credit card fraud and banking fraud? He says, no, we're just trying to help. You see how this is an absolutely true story. He put me under sodium pentothal lie detector. But at the end of it, he said, look, we have given at least, now remember, this is 30 years ago. We have given at least 10,000 people $10 million apiece or more to secure their cooperation with this project.
Wow.
And that was 30 years ago. Now, money is no object if you're printing the stuff up and you're running drugs and you're trafficking and you're siphoning off from the legitimate black budget, which there is a legitimate black budget that's overseen by the president and the key people in the Congress. We're totally legitimate. But a lot of money from that is siphoned off and is through overbilling to the government into these illegal projects. It's absolutely embezzlement. So we can prove this, by the way, and I have people who've seen it happen. Okay. But I think that when you look at that and you go, okay, well, this is where the center of power is. The center of power is not in Congress, and it's not in the White House, and it's not in the legal constitutional government or the main part of the Pentagon or agency. It's in this group. And it's amassed so much power and wealth and technology that it is, and I'll be blunt, a threat to all life on Earth. It's a threat. It's way greater threat than China or Iran or Russia, ever. And I think people have to take this, what I just said, very seriously, because all these other skirmishes, even if there were a couple nukes detonated, is nothing compared to the risk this group poses, given the technologies they possess and the intention to use it in a malevolent way. where they could stampede the whole world onto a trajectory that would be, an Armageddon scenario. So unfortunately, these people are serious about it. They're whacked out, in my opinion. One of the knock I recently met with, he says, yeah, well, even in this world, and he's been in this super black, dark world, and very high up, relatively high up, mid-level anyway. And he said the way for the folks who are these really super rogue operators, they're recruited for being sociopaths or psychopaths. Now, he says, I was recruited because I was willing to kill on behalf of the country or what's right, but not being a sociopath, to do it for the good, if you're going to use lethal force or any technology. These folks running these projects are a subset of people who are screened who are, in fact, sociopaths and psychopaths. And I'm using this clinically as a doctor. There's 4.5% of the U.S. population are sociopaths and psychopaths. So, and the ones that are high functioning are identified and moved over into these rogue operations.
Interesting.
Yeah.